I was lying on the exam table with cold gel on my stomach, looking up at a faded ceiling panel with a beach on it when my doctor stopped talking. Until then, everything had sounded ordinary. The soft click of the machine, the low hum in the room, her calm voice telling me the baby looked good. Strong heartbeat, good measurement, 12 weeks. Then she went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from concentration. A different kind. She kept her hand still on the probe for one extra second, then set it down and looked at the screen again like she wanted to make sure she had seen what she thought she had seen. I remember the room smelled faintly of sanitizer and lavender hand soap. I remember the paper under my back crackled when I shifted. I remember counting the shells in the wallpaper border near the sink because suddenly I needed my mind to hold on to something small. There were 6 shells. Then Dr. Elena Markham said, very evenly, "Ava, I need to speak with you in my office before you leave." That was the moment everything changed, though I did not know yet how far it had already gone. My name is Ava Bennett. I was 44 when I got pregnant for the first time, which was not how I had pictured that sentence sounding after all those years. By then, I had stopped using words like miracle because they made people too cheerful around me. I preferred words like progress, confirmed, stable, measured, words that did not make promises. My husband, Nolan, and I had been trying for almost 3 years. Not casually, not hopefully in the easy way people mean when they say, "We'll see what happens." I mean appointments before sunrise, hormone shots lined up in the refrigerator door, blood draws before work, insurance calls during lunch breaks, and a notebook in my kitchen drawer full of dates, dosages, and account totals I tried not to look at too often. By that point, we had spent just over $26,000 out of pocket. I knew because I kept every receipt. I found out I was pregnant on a Friday morning just after 5:30. I was standing barefoot on the bathroom tile in our townhouse outside Baltimore, holding the test in both hands like it might change its mind if I moved too quickly. I took 3 more after that, all positive. Then I sat on the closed toilet lid and laughed into my palms so I would not wake Nolan. He was already gone when I finally came out of the bathroom. He worked regional sales for a medical supply company and left early more often than not. He called me from the road around 7, and I told him while he was parked at a gas station somewhere off I-95. He cried first. I did not expect that. Neither of us said much after that. We just stayed on the phone listening to each other breathe. I worked as an office coordinator at an outpatient rehab clinic in Towson. I had been there 12 years. I was the person who checked people in, fixed scheduling mistakes, chased down prior authorizations, and knew exactly which printer jammed when the weather changed. My life, for the most part, was built on systems. Forms, calendars, color-coded notes, quiet routines. Pregnancy did not feel real at first. It felt like a fragile administrative error that might be corrected if I looked at it too hard. So I kept moving carefully through the days. I drank ginger tea. I stopped lifting laundry baskets with one hand. I read patient packets while my lunch got cold. I touched my stomach when nobody was looking, not because I could feel anything yet, but because after so long, it helped to place my hand somewhere and say, silently, yes, this is happening. The 12-week ultrasound felt important in a way I could not explain without sounding superstitious. It was the first appointment where I thought I might let myself believe it. Nolan was supposed to come, but a hospital account in Dover had changed their delivery window, and he said he could not get out of it. He apologized twice on the phone that morning. I told him it was fine. I said I understood. I said there would be other appointments. That was true. It was also the kind of thing I had gotten used to saying. The women's clinic was in a brick medical building near the county line, the sort of place with muted carpet, fake plants, and framed prints no one really sees. The receptionist asked me to confirm my address and emergency contact. I signed the tablet with the little plastic pen attached by a cord. A couple across from me were whispering over a stroller brochure. Somewhere down the hall, a printer started up. Then my name was called. The ultrasound itself began normally. Dr. Markham greeted me the way she always did, with steady eyes and a voice that never rushed. She had been with me through failed cycles, bad blood work, one quiet chemical pregnancy, and long waits between phone calls. She was not overly warm. I trusted her for exactly that reason. She dimmed the lights. The screen turned toward us. The room settled. "There," she said softly after a moment. "That's your baby." I looked at the small shape on the monitor and felt something in me loosen all at once. Relief, mostly. Relief so sharp it almost hurt. She took measurements. She smiled. "Everything looks right on track." I let out a breath I think I had been holding for 12 weeks. And then, just as I began to cry, she stopped. She studied the screen. Her expression changed in a way I could not read. Not alarm. Not clinical concern. Something more personal than that, and somehow worse. She set the probe aside, printed one image, and handed me a tissue before I had realized tears were on my face. Then she said, "Get dressed and come to my office. Please don't wait in reception." I sat up slowly. The paper on the table crackled under my hands. I did as I was told. And when I stepped into her office a few minutes later, she closed the door behind me and reached for a file that was not mine. Dr. Markham did not sit right away. She stood by her desk with one hand resting on the back of the chair, as if she were deciding whether to say something at all. The room was small and too warm. There was a lamp on the credenza instead of overhead light and a lemon hand lotion beside a stack of folders. On the wall behind her was a framed certificate and a watercolor of sailboats. I noticed all of it because she had gone so still that my mind started collecting details on its own. Then she sat down and folded her hands. "Ava," she said, "what I am about to tell you is not related to the baby. Your skin looks good. I need you to hear that first." I nodded, but I had already felt something in my chest tighten. She pulled a second chart closer and turned her monitor slightly away, then back toward herself, like she was checking one last thing before crossing a line. "Your husband is Nolan Bennett," she said. "He is listed as your emergency contact, and I know him by sight." I said yes. She looked at me for a second. "He is also listed as the emergency contact for another patient here." I did not understand the sentence at first. I heard the words. I just could not get them to arrange themselves into anything that made sense. She continued in the same calm voice. "She is 29. She is in her second trimester. He has attended multiple appointments with her." The room did not tilt or blur the way people say it does in moments like that. For me, it became painfully sharp. The edge of her desk. The sound of someone laughing faintly in the hallway. The seam in the carpet near my shoe. I asked, "Are you sure?" My voice sounded polite. That is what I remember most. Not broken. Not loud. Just polite, as if I were asking her to repeat an address. "Yes," she said. "I am sure." She did not dramatize it. She did not over-explain. She simply opened a check-in screen and turned the monitor so I could see. There was Nolan. He was sitting in the waiting room in one of those vinyl chairs by the window, leaning toward a dark-haired woman whose hand was resting under her belly. His expression was easy, familiar. The same face he made in grocery stores when he wanted me to try a sample of something. The same small smile he used when he thought he was being patient. The photo had a timestamp from a Tuesday morning 3 weeks earlier. I stared at it long enough that the image began to feel unreal, like a stock photo someone had assembled out of pieces of my life. Dr. Markham turned the screen back toward herself. "I should not have shown you that," she said quietly. "But I could not let you walk out of here without understanding what was happening around you." My mouth had gone dry. "Does she know about me?" "I don't know," she said. "And I am not going to speculate." That answer, more than anything, told me she was trying to stay inside the lines even now. She handed me a glass of water from the small fridge in the corner. I took it but did not drink. My fingers were cold against the plastic. "He told me he was in Dover today," I said. She did not respond to that. There was nothing to say. After a moment, she added, "He called this morning asking if you were done yet. I told the front desk not to confirm your status. If I were you, I would leave through the side exit." I looked at her then. Really looked at her. She was controlled, professional, careful. But there was anger in the set of her jaw. Not for herself, I think, but on my behalf. Maybe because she had watched me spend years trying to carry one life into the world while my husband had apparently been building another. I put the water on her desk untouched. "Thank you," I said. Then I stood up, picked up my purse and the ultrasound printout, and walked out through the side hallway past the employee break room and the supply closet and a cart stacked with paper gown packets. I remember the exit bar felt cold under my palm. Outside, the parking lot was bright enough to hurt my eyes. I got into my car, closed the door, and just sat there. The dashboard clock said 10:42. At 10:47, Nolan texted, "How'd it go? Want me to meet you for lunch?" I looked at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I locked the phone and set it face down in the cup holder. On the drive home, I kept both hands on the steering wheel and stayed in the right lane almost the whole way. I stopped at one red light longer than necessary because I had not noticed it had turned green. A delivery truck honked behind me. I moved forward. The radio was off. I could hear the turn signal louder than usual. At home, I went inside, set my purse on the kitchen counter, and took off my shoes. The house smelled faintly of coffee and the lemon cleaner I used on Sundays. A dish towel was still hanging over the oven handle from breakfast. On the table was the pregnancy book Nolan had bought 2 weeks earlier, open face down where he had left it. He had folded the corner of a page about sleep position in the second trimester. I stood there looking at that bent page for a full minute. Then I did what I always did when something felt unmanageable. I started with order. I took the ultrasound printout out of my purse and slid it into the top drawer beside the pens and takeout menus so it would not curl. I washed the mug I had left in the sink that morning. I put the dish towel in the hamper. I straightened the mail. None of it helped, but the movements were familiar. At 11:26, Nolan called. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Hey," he said. "You okay? You never texted back." "I'm fine," I said. "And the appointment?" "The baby looks good." His whole voice changed. Lighter. Softer. "Seriously?" "Yes." "That's amazing, Ava." I leaned one hand against the counter and looked out the kitchen window at the narrow strip of yard behind the townhouse. Somebody nearby was mowing. I could smell cut grass through the cracked window over the sink. He said, "Did they give you pictures?" "Yes. I want to see them when I get home." I closed my eyes for 1 second. "Okay." He asked if I wanted him to pick up dinner. I said no, we had enough in the fridge. He said he might be late because he had a stop added near Elkton. I said that was fine. Fine. Again. When the call ended, I opened our banking app. Not because I had a plan yet. Not because I was already being strategic. I think I just needed to place my eyes on something measurable. A balance. A transaction. A number that would either confirm or deny that the rest of my life had been real. The joint savings account loaded slowly. I knew approximately what should have been there. Not exact to the dollar, but close enough. We had talked about that money often over the last year. Nursery costs. Maternity leave cushion. Emergency reserve. The number on the screen was lower than it should have been. Not by a little. By enough that I sat down at the kitchen table without deciding to. I refreshed the page. Same number. Then I opened the transaction history and started scrolling. There were cash withdrawals. Small ones. 300. 400. 600. Spread out just enough to look ordinary at first glance. Then repeated enough to stop feeling ordinary at all. I scrolled farther. There were charges in towns Nolan passed through for work. Convenience stores. Gas stations. A pharmacy in southern New Jersey. A furniture outlet I did not recognize. Several transactions simply marked with abbreviations that meant nothing to me yet. I took screenshots until my hands started to ache. Then I made myself stop. Because for the first time since leaving the clinic, one clear thought finally came through. Do not say anything yet. I got up, walked to the hall closet, and took down the small accordion file where I kept tax forms, warranty papers, and old insurance records. I set it on the dining table and pulled out an empty section. Then I wrote 3 lines on a yellow sticky note and tucked it inside. Step 1, say nothing. Step 2, check everything. Step 3, keep paper copies. At 6:12 that evening, Nolan came home carrying iced tea and smiling like a man returning to his own life. I was standing at the stove warming leftover soup. He kissed the side of my head, set the drinks down, and said, "Show me my kid." I turned off the burner, reached for the ultrasound printout, and handed it to him. Then I waited. Nolan held the ultrasound printout with both hands and smiled down at it for longer than I expected. Not performatively. Not in some obvious way I could point to later and say, "There, that was the false note. That was the lie." He looked genuinely happy. That was part of what made the whole thing so difficult to absorb. He had not become a stranger overnight. He was still himself in all the ordinary ways. He still loosened his tie with one hand. He still leaned against the counter when he was tired. He still thanked me when I passed him a spoon. That evening, he stood in our kitchen studying the image and said, quietly, "That's really our baby." I said yes. He touched the corner of the printout with his thumb and asked if the doctor had said everything looked normal. I told him she had. He looked relieved. Then he folded the image carefully, too carefully, and said we should get a frame for one once there was a clearer picture. I watched him set it down beside his iced tea. Then we ate soup at the kitchen table and talked about almost nothing. Traffic on 95. A problem with one of his accounts. Whether the upstairs bathroom fan was getting louder. It was the most ordinary dinner I think we had ever had, and underneath it I could feel every word I was not saying, sitting there between us like another place setting. After he went upstairs to shower, I cleared the bowls and rinsed them slowly, listening to the pipes knock in the wall. I had no intention of doing anything reckless. By then, I understood one thing clearly. Whatever had been happening had not started that morning. It had shape. It had duration. It had costs. That meant it had records. And records, unlike people, did not improvise. So that night, after he fell asleep, I sat on the floor of the hallway outside our bedroom with my laptop and a legal pad. The house was dark except for the small lamp by the stairs. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional click of the baseboard heat. Nolan was asleep on his side, one arm under the pillow, breathing evenly. He had always slept quickly. It used to seem enviable. I opened the banking app again, this time on the larger screen. Then I started making columns. Dates, amounts, location, type, notes. At first, it looked random. A cash withdrawal in Vineland, gas in Millville, a supermarket in Bridgeton, a pharmacy I did not know, then another withdrawal, then another. I went back 3 months, then 6, then 12. The pattern did not leap out all at once. It developed the way a stain does, slowly enough that you almost miss it until you step back. By 1 in the morning, I had 2 pages of notes and 1 conclusion. This was not carelessness. It was maintenance. Small amounts removed steadily over time. Charges placed in a narrow geographic range. Repetition disguised as routine. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger a conversation. Nothing large enough to create immediate alarm. I put the pen down and sat back against the wall. There is a moment when you are dealing with someone who has been deceiving you for a long time, when the injury shifts shape. It stops being just emotional. It becomes procedural. You begin to understand that there was a method, a calendar, a system. That realization is colder than heartbreak. It is less cinematic and much more useful. The next morning, I woke up tired but unusually clear. At work, I moved through the front desk routine almost automatically. Insurance cards, copays. One patient forgot her referral again. Another needed her appointment pushed because her ride had not shown up. The copier jammed twice before 10. Linda, my supervisor, asked if I was feeling all right because I looked pale. I told her pregnancy fatigue. She nodded in the brisk way people do when they do not want more information than they asked for. At lunch, instead of eating, I drove to the public library. I printed 12 months of statements. I did not do it from the clinic because I did not want the records anywhere near my work login, and I did not do it at home because I did not know yet what Nolan noticed and what he ignored. The library printer was 10 cents a page. I fed it a $5 bill and stood there while page after page slid out warm and slightly curled. I put them in a plain manila folder. Back in my car, I wrote the month range on the tab and tucked the folder under the passenger seat. That evening, I called my cousin Mara. Mara was not actually my cousin in the strictest sense. She was my mother's cousin's daughter, which in our family still qualified. She worked as a litigation assistant for a family law attorney in Annapolis and had the kind of mind that organized information instinctively. If she packed a suitcase, there would be labeled pouches inside. If she made chili, she probably had a backup recipe in case the first one failed. I did not tell her everything at once. I asked first if she was alone. She said yes. Then I said, I need you to listen all the way through before you say anything. There was a pause. Okay, so I told her. Not dramatically. Not in perfect order. I told her about the appointment, Dr. Markham, the second patient, the photo, the bank account, the withdrawals, the towns, the pattern. I heard myself saying the words and still felt, in some detached part of my mind, that I was describing somebody else's marriage. Mara did not interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled slowly and said, all right. Not, oh my God. Not, what are you going to do? Just all right, in the tone of someone setting a heavy box on a table and preparing to open it carefully. Then she said, first, do not confront him. Second, do not warn him in any way. Third, start preserving everything on paper. Not screenshots only. Paper. I already printed statements. Good. Keep them somewhere he cannot access. Not in the house if possible. I looked through the windshield at the rehab clinic parking lot. A delivery van was backing up near the side entrance. Somewhere inside, someone was laughing. She continued, you need to think in categories now. Money, travel, communication, housing, medical overlap, timeline. If this has been going on a while, it will leave traces in all 5. I wrote the categories down on the back of an appointment reminder card. Mara said, and Ava, yes. From this point on, assume that anything digital can change. Passwords, access, shared calendars, bank visibility, anything. So when you find something, print it. That landed cleanly in my mind. When I got home, Nolan was already there. He had taken the trash out and started a load of towels, which struck me with such normal force that I had to stand still in the laundry room for a second before I could answer his question about dinner. We ordered takeout that night. Thai. He asked if I wanted mild or medium curry because I had a new passenger. I said mild. He rubbed my shoulder while we waited for the food. He asked whether we should start looking at cribs after the next appointment. I said maybe. He nodded like that was sensible. I watched him from across the table and understood something else. He had no idea I knew. That mattered. Over the next 10 days, I became very methodical. I kept my voice level. I kept the routines intact. I packed his lunch twice. I texted him once about milk. I asked whether he could pick up batteries. I behaved like a woman who was tired, pregnant, and slightly distracted. None of that was false. It just was not the whole truth. At the same time, I built a file. Folder 1, banking. Folder 2, statement notes by location. Folder 3, work travel references. Folder 4, anything I could verify physically. The first strong pattern came from his shared work calendar. Nolan had never removed my access because, as far as he knew, there had never been a reason to. The entries were sparse, but enough was there. Dover account. Cumberland call. Field visit. Late return. Overnight inventory follow-up. When I lined those entries up against the withdrawals, clusters began to appear. 3 towns came up again and again. Vineland, Millville, Bridgeton. Southern New Jersey. Not close to home. Close enough to fit inside a workday if nobody asked too many questions. I bought a paper map at a pharmacy on my way home one Tuesday. Folded, glossy, old-fashioned. The cashier looked about 19 and called me ma'am twice. I brought the map home in my tote bag, waited until Nolan left for the gym, then spread it out on the dining room table and marked each cash withdrawal location with a yellow dot. The cluster formed almost immediately. A corridor. Roughly 20 miles. Repeated activity over more than a year. I stood over that map with the marker in my hand and felt something inside me settle further into place. Not because I was less hurt. Because confusion was beginning to turn into sequence. Step 1. Establish the pattern. Step 2. Identify the fixed point inside the pattern. Step 3. Connect him to that point with something he cannot explain away. That was the first moment I felt the shift. Not from grief to anger, from shock to structure. A few days later, that structure paid off. Nolan had left his car at home and taken a company vehicle for an early trip. I was heading out to work when I realized I had forgotten my water bottle, so I came back inside, grabbed it, and on the way out past the mudroom shelf where he usually emptied his pockets. His spare keyring was there. So was his car key. I stood still for a second. Then I picked it up, stepped into the garage, and opened the passenger door. I was not looking for a confession. I was looking for residue. Something left behind by repetition. The cars smelled faintly of coffee, dust, and the pine air freshener he always bought even though I had told him for years it gave me a headache. In the center console there were gum wrappers, charging cables, and a pair of sunglasses. In the glove compartment, registration, insurance card, napkins, an old parking stub, and a folded receipt. I unfolded it. A furniture store in Vineland. Date, 8 weeks earlier. Items, crib mattress, fitted sheets, changing pad. I read it twice. We had not bought a single baby item. We had agreed to wait until the second trimester. That had been his idea. Let's not rush anything, he had said. I put the receipt in my purse and closed the glove compartment exactly the way I had found it. Then I went to work. All day, I could feel that thin piece of paper in my bag like heat. At 4:17 p.m., Mara called. I stepped into the back stairwell to answer. I found something, I said. What kind of something? Furniture. Baby furniture. Vineland. She was quiet for one beat. Good. Not good, but useful good. I know. Scan it. Print it. Original stays with you. I leaned against the cinder block wall and looked down the stairwell toward the exit door. The metal handrail was cold under my fingers. Then Mara said, Ava, I also checked county property and lease records where I could without spending money yet. I don't have a confirmed match, but one apartment complex name came up twice in relation to mailing activity connected to Nolan's route area. My grip tightened on the phone. What name? Orchard Glen. I wrote it down on the inside cover of my notebook. That night, after Nolan fell asleep, I took out the folder, the map, and the new receipt. I laid them on the dining table under the pendant light and read through everything again in silence. Then I added a new page to the file. At the top, I wrote one line, find the address before he finds out I'm looking. Then I waited. I did not go looking for the address the next day. That was deliberate. When you know too much too quickly, you start moving from adrenaline instead of judgment, and adrenaline makes people sloppy. I had learned that much already. So I went to work. I checked patients in. I fixed a scheduling error for a man who had somehow booked 2 evaluations at the same time. I ate half a yogurt at my desk and threw the rest away. I answered Nolan's noon text about whether we needed paper towels with a simple yes. Then, after work, I parked 2 blocks from a shipping store near the edge of town and met Mara in person. She was wearing a navy blazer in July, which told me she had come straight from the office. She carried an iced coffee and a legal pad, and she did not waste time with small talk once we sat down at the back table. Here's what we know, she said. She drew a line down the center of the page. On one side, facts. On the other, assumptions. We do not build from assumptions. I nodded. She wrote as she spoke. Fact, Nolan appears repeatedly in the same part of southern New Jersey. Fact, money left the joint account in small amounts over time. Fact, baby furniture was purchased there. Fact, your doctor identified him as emergency contact for another pregnant patient. Fact, there may be lease activity connected to Orchard Glen. She tapped the other column with her pen. Assumption, he lives there part-time. Assumption, the woman is still with him. Assumption, he is paying for everything. Assumption, she knows he is married. I looked at the page for a moment and felt some of the noise in my mind settle. This was why I had called Mara. She could take a mess and give it edges. So what now? I asked. She turned the legal pad toward me and wrote 3 lines. Step 1, confirm the address. Step 2, confirm the name attached to it. Step 3, confirm a financial link he cannot explain away. Then she said, no improvising. No digital access attempts. No confronting. No showing up at anyone's door. I gave her a look. I mean it, Ava. I know. She held my gaze for a second longer to make sure I actually did. We went through the papers together. Statements, locations, the furniture receipt, the notes from the calendar. She flagged 2 recurring charges I had overlooked because they were small. One monthly charge to a women's medical practice and another to a utility company I did not recognize. The utility one was under a generic billing name. Easy to ignore. Exactly the kind of thing someone hoped a spouse would never examine twice. Print the last 18 months if you can, she said. And start a clean chronology. Dates only. No feelings. Not because feelings don't matter. Because dates travel better. That sentence stayed with me. Dates travel better. When I got home, Nolan was making pasta. He was in a good mood. He had loosened his sleeves and was stirring sauce with the wooden spoon I hated because it always split at the edge. He turned when I came in and smiled like there was nothing in his life that required effort beyond dinner. "How was your day?" he asked. "Busy." He nodded toward the stove. "Sit down. I've got it." I stood there for a second looking at him in our kitchen, in our ordinary light, with the dishwasher humming and tomato sauce warming on the stove, and I understood how people stay in false realities longer than they should. Not because the lies are so convincing, because the daily details remain intact. Pasta still cooks. Towels still get folded. Somebody asks if you want Parmesan. I sat down. I ate dinner. I asked about one of his accounts in Newark, and he answered too quickly, then corrected himself and mentioned a different town. It was a tiny thing, barely noticeable if I had not already trained myself to listen for sequence. I said nothing, just tucked it away. Later that night, after he showered, he left his phone charging on the dresser while he went downstairs to lock the back door. I did not touch it. Mara had been right about that. Screens invited panic, and panic made evidence disappear. Instead, I opened the small drawer of the nightstand where Nolan kept spare receipts, warranty cards, and those folded instruction booklets no one ever reads. Most of it was junk. Then I found an envelope from an auto insurance renewal packet, and inside it a single loose page with an address update confirmation. Not our address. A mailing change for a secondary correspondence location. Unit 4B, Orchard Glen Apartments, Vineland, New Jersey. The paper made a dry sound in my hand when I unfolded it completely. There it was. Not an idea. Not a pattern. Not a possibility. An address. I did not take the original. I had already learned that missing paper creates questions. So I carried it downstairs, scanned it on the little printer in the den, printed a copy, and put the original back in the envelope exactly as I had found it. Then I took the copy to the dining room table and started the chronology Mara wanted. Date, withdrawal, town, calendar entry, receipt, address, date, charge, medical payment, location, amount, date, furniture purchase, Vineland, date, address confirmation, Unit 4B, no adjectives, no speculation, just sequence. Around midnight, I found the monthly charges to the women's practice again and lined them up by date. 7 in a row. Same amount each month. Same billing descriptor. Not my copays. Not my treatment schedule. Something else entirely. I wrote them down in a separate column and circled them. Then I added one note under the list. This is not random spending. This is support. The next morning, my blood pressure was high at my follow-up appointment. Not dangerously high, but high enough that the nurse took it twice and frowned in a professional way before writing the second number down. The exam room smelled faintly of alcohol wipes and baby powder. I sat there with my sleeve pushed up and thought about how strange it was to have my body quietly recording stress I had not spoken aloud. The doctor advised rest. Less strain. Fewer upsetting situations. I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded, took the pamphlet she handed me, and put it in my bag beside the copied address and the timeline notes. Because by then, I understood something clearly. I was not going to win this by being louder. I was going to win it by being exact. That evening, just before 6, Mara called again. I ran the address, she said. You were right to stay patient. I stood very still in the pantry with a can of soup in my hand. What did you find? A utility enrollment tied to Unit 4B. Not in Nolan's name. I felt my stomach tighten. In whose name? There was the sound of paper moving on her end. Then she said, a woman named Aaron Cole. And for the first time, I had his address and her name on the same page. I did not say Aaron's name out loud when Mara gave it to me. I wrote it down on the back of a grocery receipt and slid it into the folder with the rest of the papers. Then I stood in the pantry for another moment with a can of soup still in my hand, listening to Nolan move around in the kitchen. Cabinet door, faucet, silverware drawer. Small sounds, ordinary sounds. That was becoming the strangest part of all of it. The evidence was getting heavier by the day, and the house still sounded exactly the same. That night, after dinner, Nolan sat beside me on the couch and asked whether I had thought any more about paint colors for the nursery. He had a catalog open on his lap. Soft greens, pale gray. One page had tiny watercolor animals on the border. I looked at the catalog, then at him, and in that moment I understood that whatever this was, however he explained it to himself, he had compartmentalized it so completely that he expected both futures to stay standing at once. I said, not yet. He nodded and turned the page. I went to bed early and did not sleep much. By morning, I had a plan. Not a dramatic one. Not a satisfying one in the emotional sense. A useful one. I called Mara from the parking lot before work. I need the next 3 steps, I said. She answered immediately, as if she had been expecting the call. All right. Step 1. Verify the woman. Step 2. Verify a financial tie between Nolan and that address or her care. Step 3. Create a setting where he cannot deny sequence once it is laid out. Not privately? Private lets him reshape it. I leaned back in the driver's seat and watched a patient in a red windbreaker walk toward the clinic entrance. So a controlled setting. Yes. I wrote it down. Then Mara added, and Ava, controlled does not mean theatrical. It means documented, timed, and witnessed. That mattered to me. I did not want a scene. I wanted reality to be harder than his version of it. A few days later, I verified Aaron without meaning to do it that day. I had gone to the pharmacy on my lunch break for prenatal vitamins and ginger chews. It was warm outside, humid enough that the inside of the windshield had fogged faintly at the corners. I was standing in line with a basket on my arm when I heard someone at the photo counter say, no, it should be under Cole. Aaron Cole. It was not some lightning bolt moment. No music. No cinematic turn. I just looked. She was about 10 feet away, standing sideways to me in a loose blue dress, one hand resting under her stomach in that instinctive way pregnant women sometimes do. Dark hair clipped back. Tired posture. She had a manila envelope tucked under one arm and a water bottle in her other hand. She did not look glamorous or calculating or any of the things angry people sometimes need the other woman to be. She looked tired. She looked like someone trying to get through an errand. I turned my cart slightly and let the line shift between us. Then I watched carefully without staring. She paid with a debit card, took her envelope, and left. I waited a full minute before walking toward the counter. Quick question, I said to the clerk, keeping my voice even. Did a prenatal photo packet just get left behind? My sister's name is Erin, and I thought I heard it. The clerk glanced around. No, she took it. Prenatal photo packet. I thanked her and stepped away. Back in the car, I wrote down the date, time, store location, and exact phrase before I started the engine. When I called Mara that evening, she was quiet for a second. That's useful, she said. Very useful. It's still not enough. No, she said. But it tells us the same thing the doctor did. Pregnancy is current. Local enough for repeat overlap. Now we keep going. The financial tie came 2 days later, and it came from something I had already seen 5 times without understanding it. I was sitting at the dining table with 18 months of statements spread in front of me in date order. The overhead light was on. The dishwasher was running. Nolan had gone to meet a coworker for what he said was a late account dinner in Newark. He had texted me from the road at 6:11 with a photo of traffic that could have been anywhere. I was not looking for new categories anymore. I was looking for repetition. That was when I noticed the monthly medical charge again. Not to my OB. To the same women's practice where Dr. Markham had treated me. Same amount each month. Same week each month. 7 months in a row. I pulled my own records from the folder and compared dates. My copays were separate. Smaller. Inconsistent. These were not mine. I lined the entries up beside the weeks Nolan had shown up in southern New Jersey, and the pattern sharpened immediately. Every monthly charge hit within 48 hours of one of those route days. I put my pen down and stared at the page. Then I called Mara. She picked up on the second ring. Tell me. I read the dates and amounts to her one by one. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. That's the connection, she said. That's the direct financial link. He's paying her prenatal bills. Yes. With our money. Yes. I looked down at the statements spread across the table, each page marked with yellow tabs and notes in the margin. For a few seconds, I could not say anything. It was not because I was shocked anymore. It was because the shape of it had finally closed. Not just an affair. Not just another address. He had tied the two lives together financially and run both through the same household account, trusting that I would remain busy, hopeful, and tired enough not to look closely. Mara let the silence sit for a moment. Then she said, "Now we move to the last stage." I reached for my notebook. Tell me. We need a setting with witnesses, no easy exit, and a clean sequence of proof. Not a court. Not yet. A family setting is better if his image there matters to him. I thought about holidays, birthdays, Sunday dinners. Then one event came to mind immediately. Nolan's mother is hosting a Labor Day cookout in 2 weeks, I said. She does it every year. Family, neighbors, church friends. 40 people, maybe. Mara was quiet for half a second. That could work. It's at her house. Even better if she's involved or knows more than she should. That sentence hung in the air. Because by then I had been thinking about his mother, Denise, more often than I wanted to admit. Denise had been cool with me for years in that polished, careful way some people can manage without ever crossing into something explicit enough to object to. She never said outright cruel things. She preferred trims, small cuts, comments about timing, energy, how late blessings can be complicated, the sort of sentences that sound harmless if repeated in public. 2 Sundays later, I went to her house with a loaf cake and my most neutral face. I told Nolan I was dropping off a recipe card she wanted for the potato salad dressing. He barely looked up from the television. Denise lived 20 minutes away in a brick ranch house with white shutters and a backyard she treated like a public venue whenever a holiday came around. Her kitchen smelled like brewed coffee and lemon polish. She took the cake, thanked me, and asked whether I wanted tea. While she went to get cups, I stood near the counter and noticed a store bag folded beside the fruit bowl. Baby Depot. I might have ignored it if not for everything else. But once you know the pattern, your eye goes to certain things on its own. The receipt was partly visible through the top fold. I did not touch the bag. I did not need to. When Denise stepped into the hallway to answer her landline, I angled my phone just enough to capture the top line of the receipt where it showed the date and last 4 digits of the card. I got only part of it. But it was enough. A crib mobile. Bottles. Swaddles. Purchased 6 weeks earlier. Not for me. We had not received a single item from Denise. Not one. I put the phone back in my pocket before she returned with the tea. We sat at the table and talked about weather, family, and whether I was resting enough. She asked how the pregnancy was going in a tone that sounded appropriate until you listened closely and noticed how careful it was. Then she said, sometimes things don't unfold the way a woman imagines, especially at this stage in life. I looked at her. She added 1 spoon of sugar to her cup and did not meet my eyes. I said, that's true. It was a small moment, but I left her house with something stronger than suspicion. I left with the feeling that she was not afraid for me. She was afraid of timing. That evening, I sent Mara the photo of the receipt fragment. She called me back within 10 minutes. She knows, Mara said. I think so too. Then the cookout matters even more. For the next week, I prepared very quietly. I organized the timeline into one binder. Clear sleeves. Tabs. One section for bank statements, one for medical charges, one for the Vineland address, one for the furniture and baby item receipts, one for the chronology. No dramatic cover. No notes in red ink. Just sequence. Dates travel better. I also did one more thing. I sent Aaron a message. I kept it short. My name is Ava Bennett. I am married to Nolan Bennett. I believe we need to speak. I am not contacting you to blame you. I think you may not have all the facts. Then I put the phone face down. She did not answer that night. Or the next day. On the third day, just after 8 p.m., while Nolan was downstairs taking out the trash, my phone buzzed once. The message was 4 words long. How do I know? I read Aaron's message 3 times before I answered. Nolan was still downstairs. I could hear the back door open and close, then the scrape of the trash bin against the concrete beside the garage. The house smelled faintly of dishwasher steam and the rosemary chicken I had reheated for dinner. I stood by the bedroom window with my phone in my hand and kept my reply simple. You can know because I can prove it. If you want, I'll show you. In person. Neutral place. She responded 20 minutes later. Tomorrow. Late morning. Public place. We met at a diner just off Route 40 the next day. I chose it because it was halfway, quiet between breakfast and lunch, and ordinary enough not to attract attention. Vinyl booths. Coffee that smelled stronger than it tasted. A waitress refilling creamers at the counter. Rain pressing lightly against the windows in short bursts. Nothing about it felt dramatic, which is exactly why it worked. Erin arrived 5 minutes after I did. She looked younger up close than she had in the pharmacy. Not immature, just tired in a younger way. Her hair was pulled back, and she was wearing a gray cardigan over a maternity top with flat sandals that looked practical rather than chosen. She moved carefully when she sat down across from me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "If you're here to humiliate me, I'm leaving." "I'm not," I said. She looked at me for a long moment, trying to decide whether that was true. So I took out only the first document, not all of them. Our marriage certificate. Certified copy. Date. County seal. Nolan's full name. Mine. I placed it on the table between us. Then I took out a family photo from the previous fall. Nolan and me at my aunt's retirement dinner. His hand on my shoulder. Restaurant date visible on the printed order slip in the background if anyone looked closely enough. Then my 12-week ultrasound printout. Then the page showing the recurring medical charges from our joint account to Dr. Markham's practice. I did not rush. I did not stack papers in a way that felt performative. I just laid them down in order. Erin looked at the marriage certificate first, then the photo, then the ultrasound. By the time she reached the bank statement, both her hands were flat on the table. "He told me you were divorced," she said. I nodded once. "We are not. He said you had been apart for years." "We have not." She looked down again at the photo, and I could see the exact second the last piece of his version stopped holding. The waitress came by and asked if we wanted coffee. Erin shook her head. I asked for hot water and never touched it. "He told me he traveled for work," she said after a while. "That he stayed over because of account coverage. He said his mother was in Florida half the year. He said," she stopped there and looked out at the parking lot for a moment. "He said a lot of things." "I know," I said. She swallowed once. "I didn't know about you. I believe that might be true." That seemed to matter to her. Not enough to make it better, but enough to let her stay seated. Then she told me what I needed and what I had not fully had before, sequence from the other side. Nolan had rented the apartment more than a year earlier. He had told her it was temporary, closer to work, easier for nights on the road. He had used a second phone for her from the beginning. He had said paperwork was delayed on his divorce because of property issues. He had started going to appointments with her after she got pregnant. He had paid bills directly more than once because, according to him, shared finances were still being untangled. Shared finances. I wrote that phrase down later because it was so cleanly false. Then Erin told me one more thing. "He keeps copies of everything in a blue expanding file," she said. "Lease papers, invoices, baby receipts, car insurance, all of it. He's weird about paper." That almost made me smile, though not because anything was funny. He had built 2 systems. I had simply found the second one. I asked her whether she still wanted to come to Denise's cookout. She sat with that for a while. Rain tapped against the window. Someone at the counter laughed too loudly at something on a phone. A truck idled outside and then pulled away. Finally, she said yes, but not for revenge. No, I said, not for revenge. For truth. Yes, we agreed on 3 things. First, there would be no yelling. Second, I would speak first and keep it factual. Third, Erin would only say what she knew firsthand and nothing more. No improvising. No speeches. No trying to win the room emotionally. Just sequence. After the diner, I drove to Mara's office and spread everything out on her conference table. She added one final divider to the binder, third-party confirmation. Inside that section, she put a typed summary with dates, Nolan's overlapping claims, the Vineland address, the medical billing pattern, and a note that Erin was prepared to confirm in person that she had been told Nolan was divorced. Now it holds, Mara said. I looked down at the binder. For the first time since the ultrasound, I did not feel like I was chasing something moving. I felt like I was standing in one place with the facts finally lined up in front of me. The cookout was on a Saturday. Denise's backyard looked exactly the way it always did for these things. Folding tables with plastic covers, condiment trays, a cooler full of ice, her flag-themed napkins in a basket by the drinks. Nolan's uncle working the grill like he had been assigned a military post. Church friends near the hydrangeas. Children cutting across the grass with popsicles staining their hands. Normal enough that it almost felt impossible to place anything difficult inside it. I got there early and helped set out bowls and trays. Denise watched me more than once with a look I had never seen on her before. Not dislike. Calculation. Nolan arrived 30 minutes later with a case of soda and kissed my cheek in front of 3 relatives. You okay? He asked quietly. Fine, I said. And that was the last lie I told him. At 2:40, the side gate opened. Erin stepped through alone. Conversation did not stop all at once. It thinned, then stalled, then disappeared. Nolan was standing near the grill with a paper plate in one hand. He saw her and went completely still, not confused, not surprised in a vague way, recognizing, immediate, clear. Denise turned at almost the same moment. The pitcher in her hand slipped against the edge of the table and hit the ground. Lemonade spread over the flagstones in a line of ice and broken glass. Nobody moved at first. That helped me. I stepped toward the center table, set the binder down, and opened it to the first tab. I did not raise my voice. This is Erin Cole, I said. She lives in Vineland, New Jersey, at Unit 4B, Orchard Glen Apartments. Nolan has been financially supporting that household from our joint account for more than a year. Nolan opened his mouth. I held up one hand, not dramatically, just enough to stop the interruption. Then I continued. These are the bank withdrawals. These are the repeated charges to Dr. Markham's practice. These are the baby item receipts. This is the address confirmation in Nolan's possession. This is our marriage certificate. I am 14 weeks pregnant. Erin is further along. Nolan told her he was divorced. He is not. I turned one page at a time as I spoke. Dates, amounts, receipts. The room stayed quiet enough that I could hear the binder ring shift when I moved the papers. Erin did not speak until I had finished. Then she said, very evenly, he told me there was no wife. Then he told me there was an ex-wife. Then he told me the finances were being worked out. None of that was true. That was all. It was enough. Denise sat down without meaning to, as if her knees had simply stopped cooperating. Nolan looked from me to the documents to Erin and back again, trying to find a version of events that still had space left in it. There was none. His uncle took the plate gently out of his hand and set it on the table. One of Denise's church friends walked the children toward the side yard without saying why. Somebody near the drinks muttered, "Lord have mercy," in a tone that was not theatrical at all. Just tired. Nolan finally said my name. Only my name. I looked at him and said, no, not here. The facts are enough. And they were. There was no argument because the argument required uncertainty, and by then uncertainty was gone. Mara had been right. Dates traveled better. The practical consequences started that same weekend. I stayed with my sister for 3 nights. Mara connected me with an attorney on Monday morning. I moved half the savings into a separate account under legal guidance that afternoon. My doctor documented stress concerns and put tighter restrictions around work hours. Nolan sent long messages, then shorter ones, then apologies stripped down to fragments. I did not answer any of them directly. My lawyer did. Erin texted me 2 days later to say she had moved in temporarily with her brother. She did not ask me for anything. She just sent one line, "Thank you for telling me the truth before the baby came." Denise left one voicemail, then another, then none. Within 2 weeks, the apartment payments, medical charges, and transfer patterns were all sitting in a formal financial disclosure request. That was the part one needed most in the end. Not a confession, not an apology, a record. And once the record existed, the rest stopped being a story Nolan could manage with tone and timing. It became procedure. 3 weeks after the cookout, I was back in my own kitchen on a Tuesday morning, standing barefoot on the cool tile, making tea before work. The house was quiet. My blood pressure had come down. The kettle clicked off. Rain moved softly against the window over the sink. On the table beside me sat a neat stack of labeled folders ready for my attorney meeting that afternoon. I poured the tea, added a little honey, and rested one hand against the curve of my stomach. For the first time in months, everything in front of me was difficult but clean. Then the phone buzzed with a new message from Mara. "There's one more document you should see before court." Mara sent the document over as a scanned PDF a few minutes later. I did not open it right away. That probably sounds strange after everything else, but by then I had learned the value of sequence. Tea first, breath first, then paper. So I carried my mug to the table, sat down in the quiet kitchen, and opened the file. It was a loan application. Not approved, not finalized, but started. Nolan's name, Erin's name, the Vineland address listed as current resident, a section partially completed for expected household income, another for dependents. The date on the form was from 6 weeks before my ultrasound. I read it once, then again. What struck me was not the financial piece, though that mattered. It was the ordinary ambition of it. He had not only lied about the present. He had begun drafting a future on paper while still sleeping in my house and asking me about nursery paint. I forwarded the file to my attorney and then closed my laptop. That was all. No shaking hands this time. No panic. No rush to call anyone. Just one more document added to the order of things. By that point, life had become unexpectedly simple in certain ways. Not easier. Simpler. I no longer spent energy trying to reconcile what I knew with what I was being told. That work was over. The facts had already done it for me. The legal process moved the way legal processes do. Quietly, then all at once, then quietly again. There were meetings, disclosures, timelines, requests answered through counsel, statements reviewed line by line, a temporary financial agreement, separate living arrangements, a formal filing. My attorney was measured and dry and exactly the way I needed. She did not dramatize anything. She simply kept asking for records, and records kept answering. Nolan did try, a few times, to move things back into the softer world of emotion. One email said he had made mistakes, but still loved me. Another said he had been overwhelmed and trapped. A voicemail I did not listen to until much later asked whether we could talk like adults. My attorney advised me not to engage outside the process, and I did not. Because the truth was, we were already talking like adults. Adults put the timeline in writing. Adults separate accounts properly. Adults answer formal requests. Adults do not ask the woman they deceive to help them feel better about the paperwork. My pregnancy moved forward at the same time. That became the axis I organized myself around. Appointments, meals, rest, water. Work reduced to what my doctor felt was safe. My sister came with me to 2 visits. Mara came to one when my sister could not. The baby stayed steady through all of it. Every time I heard that heartbeat, I felt the room inside me reorder itself again. I did not become fearless. I became consistent. There is a difference. The court side resolved slowly, but the practical consequences were already in place long before anything final was signed. Joint funds were examined. Spending trails were documented. The apartment support and prenatal payments to Aaron's care were accounted for. The attempted loan application became one more indication that the deception was not impulsive. It had planning behind it. That mattered. Denise never really apologized. She called once near the end and asked if we could put some of this behind us for the baby's sake, which told me she still thought peace was something a woman should provide after other people had damaged the structure. I told her, calmly, that peace and pretending were not the same thing. Then I wished her well and ended the call. Aaron and I stayed in occasional contact, though not in some dramatic lifelong sisterhood way people might expect. That would not have been real. What was real was simpler. We exchanged practical information when needed. A doctor recommendation, a copy of one billing statement, a short note after one difficult hearing date. Once, she sent me a message saying the baby had been kicking all morning and she had finally slept 3 hours in a row. I told her that counted as a major victory. That was enough. Months later, after my son was born, I was home one quiet afternoon folding tiny washed clothes that had somehow already become too small for him. The window was cracked open. I could hear a lawnmower 2 houses over and the low rattle of somebody dragging a recycling bin to the curb. The house smelled faintly of baby soap and toast. My son was asleep in the bassinet near the couch, one hand open beside his face like he had simply run out of energy mid-thought. I folded a white onesie, then a blanket, then one pair of socks so small they looked invented. And I realized, standing there in that soft, ordinary room, that the story had ended a while ago. Not in court. Not at the cookout. Not with a document. It ended the first morning I chose order over confusion and never stepped back. The rest was administration. I still keep labeled folders. I still write dates down. I still prefer paper copies for anything that matters. Some habits come from fear and leave when fear does. Others stay because they proved useful. I no longer resent that part of myself. It carried me through. These days, peace looks very plain from the outside. Tea in the morning. A clean counter. Laundry done before noon if I can manage it. My son asleep against my shoulder after a bottle. No one asking me to ignore what is in front of me. No one rearranging reality and calling it love. That is more than enough. Every now and then, someone reaches out quietly after hearing part of what happened. Not for gossip, for guidance. A neighbor's sister, a woman from church. Someone who found a receipt, an address, a charge that did not fit, and needed another person to say, gently, start with the facts. Keep copies. Move carefully. Let the record do the work. I never give speeches. I just tell them what helped me. Say less at first. Notice more. Write dates down. And keep your own life in order while the truth catches up. If you stayed with me through this, thank you. I mean that. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy calm, real stories like this one. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I always like reading them when the house is quiet. 2 popular stories will be waiting for you next.